True. When people come into my house with their shoes on, Jide said, his eyes darkening. They are bringing in their essence, their life force. My mother taught me how to use that, to take what they bring in and make it mine. Folake felt a wave of nausea washed over her.
I see you, my heart, baby. A lady of all men's dreams. You be the one where they make me the
door cracked open and Folake stepped into the living room of Jide's apartment. Her high heels clicked sharply against the polished wooden floor. As she crossed the threshold, she barely had time to take in her surroundings before she heard Jide's voice. Folake! Jide's voice was a harsh whip slicing through the stillness of the room. Folake froze, her heart skipping a beat. She turned slowly to find Jide standing at the entrance of the living room, his eyes wide with fury, his chest heaving with barely contained rage. "What did I tell you about wearing shoes into my house?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. Folake looked down at her feet, suddenly aware of the red stilettos she had forgotten to take off. "Oh, Jide, I'm sorry, I didn't even think about it." "Didn't think about it?" Jide cut her off, his tone cold and unforgiving. "You've been to my house more than enough times to know the rules, Folake. No shoes inside, ever." Folake quickly bent down to remove her shoes, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the straps. I'm really sorry, Jide. It won't ever happen again." Jide's expression softened slightly as she finally stepped out of her shoes and placed them by the door. But the tension in the room was palpable, hanging between them like a thick fog. "It's better not," Jide muttered, his voice still tinged with anger. "I can't stand it when people bring death from outside into my space." Folake, now barefoot, walked hesitantly towards him, trying to diffuse the tension. "I promise, Jide, I'll be more careful next time." Jide nodded, though his eyes lingered on the spot where her shoes had been, as if he could still see the invisible traces of death they might have left behind. "Make sure you do." Folake offered a small apologetic smile, trying to move past the awkwardness. "So, what are we having for dinner?" Jide forced a smile in return, but there was a strange intensity in his eyes that made Folake uneasy. "I've prepared something special, just relax and I'll bring it out." As Jide disappeared into the kitchen, Folake took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unsettling encounter. Jide had always been a little particular about cleanliness, but his obsession with the no shoes rule had grown more extreme lately. She couldn't understand why it mattered so much to him, but there was something else that bothered her, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. The way Jide had reacted, the sheer intensity of his anger, felt like more than just irritation at a house rule being broken. It felt sinister. Hey guys, welcome back today. Please take a moment and like this video as we take you on this incredible journey as why you should never get into a stranger's house with your shoes on. As Jide busied himself in the kitchen preparing their meal, Folake wandered around the living room. She had always admired Jide's taste in decor. Everything was meticulously arranged, from the modern furniture to the abstract painting on the wall. But there was an air of sterile about the place, a coldness that made her feel like she was in a museum rather than a home. Her gaze drifted to a small locked cabinet in the corner of the room. It was the only piece of furniture that seemed out of place, an antique wooden chest with intricate carvings that didn't match the rest of the modern decor. Folake had asked Jide about it once, but he had quickly changed the subject, saying it was just a family heirloom. Her curiosity piqued. She found herself drawn to the cabinet. She knew she couldn't pry, but something about it called to her, urging her to take a closer look. As she approached it, she noticed a faint, almost impeccable scent, a mix of herbs and something else, something she couldn't quite identify. Just as she reached out to touch the cabinet, Jide's voice startled her. "Dinner is ready." Folake jumped, quickly pulled her hand back as Jide entered the room, carrying a tray with 2 steaming plates of food. He set the tray down on the coffee table and looked at her with a strange expression. Was it suspicion? Everything okay? Jide asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Folake nodded, quickly trying to hide her unease. Yeah, everything is fine. I was just admiring your cabinet. It's really beautiful. Jide's smile didn't reach his eyes. Thank you. It's been in my family for generations, but it's just an old piece of wood. Folake forced a smile, trying to ignore the chill that ran down her spine. It's lovely. They sat down to eat, and as they made small talk, Folake couldn't shake the feelings that something was off. Jide was charming as always, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air, a sense that something was being carefully concealed just beneath the surface. When dinner was over, Folake excused herself to the bathroom. As she washed her hands, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes wide with unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she was missing, something important. As she rejoined Jide in the living room, he handed her a glass of wine. To us, he said, raising his glass. Folake clinked her glass against his, but the toast fell hollow, empty. She took a sip of the wine, but her mind was elsewhere, on the cabinet, on the strange scent, on the way Jide had reacted when she mentioned it. But she pushed those thoughts aside, telling herself she was just being paranoid. Jide was a good man, a bit eccentric perhaps, but good. She was sure of it, or at least she wanted him to be. It wasn't until later that night, as she lay in bed next to Jide, that Folake's thoughts returned to the cabinet. She couldn't shake the feelings that there was something inside it, something Jide didn't want her to see. She turned to look at Jide, who was already fast asleep. His face was peaceful, his breathing steady. For a moment, Folake felt guilty for doubting him, but then she remembered the way he had reacted when she entered the house with her shoes on, the anger, the intensity. What if there was more to it than just a rule about cleanliness? Unable to sleep, Folake carefully slipped out of bed and tiptoed into the living room. The apartment was silent, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. She approached the cabinet again, her heart pounding in her chest. She hesitated for a moment, then decided to try the handle. To her surprise, it turned easily in her hand. The cabinet was unlocked. Slowly, she opened the cabinet door, her breath catching in her throat as she saw what was inside. Rows of small jars lined the shelves, each one carefully labeled with a name and a date. The contents of the jar were disturbing, dates that shoes could pick up, names and dates on each one, and other strange items. At the very back of the cabinet, hidden behind the jars, was a small worn journal. Folake's hand shook as she reached out for it, flipping it open to the first page. The handwriting was neat, precise. The entries were dated, each one describing a person who had visited Jide's home and what Jide had done to them if they dared to break his no shoes rule. Folake's stomach churned as she read the entries. Jide had been collecting these trophies for years, using them in some kind of dark ritual. The journal was filled with detailed description of how Jide believed the dirt from the shoes carried a person's essence, their life force, and how he used that essence to feed his own power. Folake felt sick. The man she thought she knew was a monster, someone who had been preying on the people who trusted him, using their most intimate traces to fuel his own twisted desires. She slammed the journal shut, her heart racing as she realized the danger she was in. She had to get out of there now. But as she turned to leave, she froze. Jide was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing, Folake?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. Folake clutched the journal to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. "Jide, what is this? What have you been doing?" Jide took a step forward, his eyes darkening. "You weren't supposed to see that." Folake backed away, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way to escape. I didn't mean to. I was just curious." Jide's lips curled into a cold smile. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Folake. You should have listened to me when I told you to take off your shoes and stay at that." Folake's back hit the wall as she realized there was no way out. Jide was blocking the only exit and she was trapped. "Please, Jide," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear." Jide shook his head slowly, his eyes gleaming with a sinister light. I'm afraid I can't do that, Folake. You've seen too much. Before she could react, Jide lunged at Folake, his hands reaching for journal. Panic surged through her, and with a burst of adrenaline, she ducked out of the way just in time. Jide stumbled forward, momentarily off balance, and Folake seized the opportunity. She darted towards the door, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear anything else. The room seemed closed in on her, the walls narrowing, but she didn't look back. All she could think of was getting out of that house, out of Jide's twisted, sinister trap. But Jide recovered quickly. Before she could reach the door, he was on her again, grabbing her arms with a vice-like grip. Folake screamed, struggling to free herself, but Jide was too strong. "Let me go," she cried, her voice filled with desperation. "Please, Jide, you don't have to do this." But Jide's expression was cold. "I can't let you leave, Folake. You know that." Folake thrashed against him, using all her strength, but it felt like fighting against a wall of stone. She could feel his breath on her neck, hot and menacing. She was losing this battle and she knew it. But then, by some miracle, her hand brushed against the edge of a lamp on the nearby table. Without thinking, she grabbed it and swung it with all her might, hitting Jide squarely in the head. Jide grunted in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Folake to break free. She didn't waste a second. She threw the door open and ran out of the apartment, down the stairs and into the cool night air. Her bare feet slapped against the pavement as she fled, her breath coming in a raged gasp. She didn't stop until she was several blocks away, her lungs burning and her legs trembling from the exertion. Only then did she dare to look back, half expecting to see Jide chasing after her. But the street was empty, silent except for the distant hum of traffic. Folake collapsed onto a nearby bench, her body shaking uncontrollably. She couldn't believe what had just happened, what she had discovered about Jide. The man she had trusted, the man she had almost loved, was a monster. And she had barely escaped with her life. The next morning, Folake made the decision to go to the police. She knew she couldn't keep what she had discovered a secret, not when there could be other victims, other people in danger. But even as she recounted the events of the previous night to the police officers, she could see the skepticism in their eyes. Jide was well respected in the community, a successful businessman with no prior record of violence. The idea that he was involved in some kind of dark ritual sounded like the plot of a horror movie, not real life. Still, the police took her statement and promised to investigate. Folake wasn't sure if they believed her, but she knew she had done the right thing. As she left the police station, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jide. "We need to talk. Meet me at the house tonight." Folake's blood ran cold. She couldn't believe he had the nerve to contact her after what had happened. But then she realized this could be her chance to get more evidence, to prove to the police that she wasn't making this up. With trembling hands, she replied to the message, agreeing to meet him. But she had no intention of going alone. She contacted the police, telling them about the message, and they agreed to send plainclothes officers to stake out the house while she went inside. That evening, Folake found herself standing in front of Jide's apartment building once again, her heart pounding in her chest. She was terrified, but she knew she couldn't back out now, not if she wanted to stop Jide from hurting anyone else. She took a deep breath and walked up the stairs. When she reached Jide's door, she hesitated for a moment before knocking. The door swung open almost immediately and Jide stood there, his expression unreadable. "Folake," he said, his voice calm, almost gentle. "I'm glad you came." Folake forced herself to smile, even though every instinct in her body was screaming at her to run. "I need to understand, Jide. I needed to know why." Jide nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "I will explain everything, but first, let's go to the living room." Folake entered the apartment, her eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. Everything looked the same as before, neat, sterile, perfect. But she knew better now. She knew what was hidden beneath the surface. As they sat down on the couch, Jide began to speak, his voice low and measured. He told her about his childhood, how his mother had been obsessed with cleanliness, how she had drilled into him the importance of keeping the house spotless. But it wasn't just about cleanliness. He explained it was about control. When people come into my house with their shoes on, Jide said, his eyes darkening, they are bringing in their essence, their life force. My mother taught me how to use that, to take what they bring in and make it mine. Folake felt a wave of nausea washed over her. You mean you take their life force? What does that even mean, Jide? Jide leaned in closer, his eyes boring into hers. It means that I absorb their energy, their vitality. It makes me stronger, more powerful. That's why I can't let anyone break the rule. Folake, if they do, they have to pay the price. Folake's mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what he was saying. It sounded like madness, like something out of a nightmare. But she knew Jide believed every word of it. She had to keep him talking, keep him distracted until the police made their move. But why, Jide? Why would you do this? Why would you hurt people like this just because they didn't remove their shoe to your house? Jide's expression softened as if he genuinely believed he was doing something good. I'm not hurting them, Folake. I'm helping them. I'm taking their borders, their plan, and make it my own. It's a gift. Folake felt tears sting her eyes. She couldn't believe this was happening, that the man she had trusted was capable of such evil. But what about me, Jide? What are you going to do to me? Jide reached out, gently brushing a tear from her cheeks. I won't hurt you, Folake. I care about you, but you have to understand. I can't let you leave now that you know the truth. You will stay here with me and we'll be together forever. Folake's heart skipped a beat. She knew this was her moment, her only chance to escape. She just needed to keep him talking a little longer. But before she could say anything else, there was a loud crash as the front door burst open and several police officers stormed into the room, guns drawn. Jide Adeyemi, you are under arrest, one of the officers shouted, advancing towards him. Jide's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, he looked like a frightened child. But then his expression hardened and he turned to Folake, his eyes filled with betrayal. You called them? He whispered, his voice trembling with anger. Folake couldn't speak, couldn't move. All she could do was nod, tears streaming down her face. Jide let out a roar of fury, lunging at her, but the officers were too quick. They tackled him to the ground, pinning him down as they cuffed his hand behind his back. As they dragged him away, Jide's eyes never left Folake. You will regret this, Folake, he sneered. You will regret this for the rest of your life. But Folake didn't respond. She watched in silence as they took him away, her heart heavy with a mix of relief and sorrow. In the weeks that followed, the story of Jide Adeyemi's arrest spread like wildfire. The media was fascinated by the bizarre case of the man who had preyed on his guests, using their life well to his own twisted desire, just because they didn't remove their shoe to his house. Folake found herself at the center of the storm, her life turned upside down by the revelation. She was grateful to be alive, but the trauma of what she had discovered haunted her. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if she hadn't escaped that night. But there were still so many unanswered questions. So many things she could never fully understand. How had Jide become that person he was? What had driven him to such darkness? And most of all, how could she have been so blind to the evil that had been right in front of her? The police investigation revealed that Jide had been involved in dark ritual for years, dating back to his childhood. His mother seems to have been the one to introduce him to the practice, instilling in him a belief that he could harness the energy of others for his own gain once they enter his house barefoot. It was a twisted legacy that had been passed down from generation to generation, a curse disguised as a gift. Months passed, and Folake moved to a new city, far from the memories of Jide and the horror she had uncovered. But even in her new life, there were moments when the past would creep in on her. One evening, as she was settling into her new apartment, a friend came over for a visit. They chatted and laughed, catching up on each other's lives. But as her friend prepared to leave, she paused at the door, glancing down at the shoes lined up neatly by the entrance. Do you mind if I put my shoes on here? Her friend asked, a casual question that made Folake's heart skip a beat. For a moment, Folake was transported back to Jide's apartment, to the terror she had felt and the dark secret she had uncovered, but she quickly shook off the memory, forcing a smile. Of course, go ahead, she said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. Her friend slipped on her shoes and opened the door, turning back to Folake with a grin. You know, some people are really strict about the no-shoe rule. I always wonder why it mattered so much. Folake's smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. I guess everyone has their reasons, she replied, her tone light, though the weight of the past still lingered in her mind. As her friend waved goodbye and walked out the door, Folake stood there for a moment, lost in thought. The events of the past had left her with scars that would never fully heal, but they had also given her a new perspective, a deeper understanding of the things we take for granted. And as she closed the door behind her friend, a single haunting question echoed in her mind, one that she knew she would never forget. The next time you visit someone's home, will you think twice before stepping inside with your shoes on? Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to share this story with your family and your friend who might need to see this. Till I see you again in my next story. Goodbye.